Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from London. I'm Oliver Regan and these are the headlines. French President Emmanuel Macron's pension reform plan faces a make or break moment as major unions launch protests against his plans to push back the age of retirement.
And so today I'm announcing that I will not be seeking re-election and that my term as Prime Minister will conclude no later than the 7th of February.
New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern announces that she will resign next month at the meeting of her Labour Party. She says, "I just don't have enough in the tank for another 4 years." Iran warns the EU will shoot itself in the foot by listing Revolutionary Guards as a terrorist entity. This comes a day after the European Parliament voted to urge Brussels to list Iran's IRGC as a terror group. Ukrainian President Zelensky criticises hesitation by Germany on supplying its modern Leopard tanks. This after reports said that Berlin will send tanks only if the US offers its tanks as well. Legendary sprinter Usain Bolt is missing $12.7 million from his account with a private investment firm in Jamaica. His team has threatened civil and criminal action if the money's not returned within 10 days. France is bracing for a nightmare Thursday as major unions stage nationwide protest against President Emmanuel Macron's pension reforms. Last week, French Prime Minister presented changes to the country's national retirement programme, according to which the age for retirement will rise from 62 to 64 and increase the years of contributions required for a full pension also has been proposed. As soon as the announcement was made, trade unions across France immediately called for a massive mobilisation against the reforms. This is the first time in the last 12 years when all unions have united in protests. In 2010, France saw similar agitation when the retirement age was hiked from 62 to from 60, and they're demanding that the measures be immediately withdrawn, describing them as unfair and unnecessary.
Well, it's completely unfair because there are actually other ways of paying for pensions. It is indeed a political choice not to help the workers of the country for the system, which is a system of solidarity, and forgetting that pensioners are not just people outside of society. They also contribute. They are important to society.
Along with unions, 70% of teachers are also expected to strike. This has led to closure of some schools. Transport and health services will also be impacted by the strike. Most trains will not run, while the Paris Metro has said its services will be heavily disrupted, and flights are reported to have also been cancelled. Strikes have been announced by truck drivers, couriers and delivery companies as well. Oil refinery workers are also stopping work. The unions are reportedly hoping for over 1 million demonstrations in more than 200 cities across France. Intercity trains are expected to be the worst hit, with warnings that almost all will be cancelled on Thursday. Staff at many theatres, music venues and banks are also expected to join the strike, while police are bracing for protesters taking to the streets across the country.
There is no winners in this reform, and the thing is that there are some people who are not impacted at all from this reform, which are the current pensioners, the white collars and the skilled people, because they would have worked long anyway. They started later than the other ones, and if they wanted to have a full pension, they would have had to work up to 65 and even more.
The government, which lost its majority in the general election last June, insists it will not back down and has asked workers not to paralyse the country. Pensions reform has long been a controversial issue in France, with street protests halting reform efforts in 1995 and successive governments facing stiff resistance to reforms. They'd eventually passed in 2004, 2008 and 2010. Well, for more on this, our correspondent Sarah Coates joins us live from Paris. Sarah, it looks like France is grinding to a standstill. Give us the latest from where you are and how things lie in Paris.
Yes, hello there. Well, look, this could be very much the start of a huge movement here right across France. And of course, here in Paris, where we are, even getting into the office this morning was an absolute nightmare. As you mentioned in that lead, most public transport has ground to a halt. Flights are cancelled. People simply are not coming to the office because it is basically impossible to do so. Now, as you mentioned, 8 of France's biggest unions, this is the first time in more than a decade that they have come together on a specific issue. They're joining forces, calling on everyone in France to take to the streets to protest against this proposed pension reform, which would take people from working until 62 to 64 by 2030. Now, the government is really hoping to get this passed by the summer, but is seriously being met with a lot of opposition within Parliament and here on the streets. Now, here in Paris, in just a few hours' time, we are expecting a massive protest. We're hearing that more than 10,000 police have already been deployed, with 8 of the biggest unions joining forces. As I mentioned, they'll have these big trucks, balloons, and people taking a few kilometre walk down the street. A lot of the times with these protests, they do certainly turn ugly. So that is yet to be seen whether that will happen with this one. But, you know, this could, as I said, be the start of a few long months of similar protests, with unions saying that it is unfair, unnecessary, and they will keep taking to the streets until the government drops this controversial pension reform, which it did try and bring in 2019, but was scrapped in 2020 when the pandemic hit. So it is very interesting. It will be very, very interesting to see, you know, if these unions and the power of the people, with an opinion poll that was just conducted recently saying around 70% of people are very, very unhappy with these changes, noting that people do know that there do need to be changes to the pension system, but saying raising the age from 62 to 64 is absolutely ludicrous, and they will not stand for that.
Sarah Coates joining us live from Paris there. Many thanks. For more on this now, we're going to get another view from Marseille, France. Cole Stangler, he's a French-American independent journalist who's an expert in politics and labour issues in France. Well, Cole, many thanks for joining us. Look, we're all living longer. It's going to cost more to look after us when we're older. Why is this issue so controversial, raising the retirement age?
Yeah, that's certainly what the government is saying. It's a line we've heard from Emmanuel Macron. Retirement reform in France touches on a couple of different issues. One is for the left, for the unions that are mobilizing today, and we're seeing those numbers are pretty significant. Retirement reform, or retirement itself, is seen as sort of a victory of the labor movement, part of an ongoing march of social progress, if you will. They connect it to the end of working days on Sunday, on the weekend, of having basic regulations. And so retirement is seen as a victory of the labor movement and of the left, enshrined into law just after World War II. And they see fundamentally the government's attempt to raise the age as an attempt to basically go back on these decades of social progress and to push more people sort of into the realm of the economy. So they see it as a fundamental attack on their basic rights. That's for the left and for much of the labor movement. But you also need to look at the rest of the French population, because we're seeing in those polls that you were mentioning, 7 out of 10 French people opposed to this reform. we're seeing the numbers today that are likely to be pretty significant. Those people are not all trade unionists and left-wing activists. They're attached to this system, which is, broadly speaking, pretty effective, certainly when you compare it to other countries. The French retirement system. France spends a lot of money on this system, around 14% of its GDP. But if you look at how France compares to its neighbors, retirees have it relatively well in France. France has the second lowest rate of senior poverty among all OECD countries. So a much lower rate of poverty for senior workers, for seniors, than the US, obviously, the UK as well, even Germany and Sweden. And France also has a relatively high, what's called a net replacement rate. So the amount of earnings that are coming in from pensions compared to salaries, around 70% in France. So people have it relatively good for retirees. So people are attached to the system. Again, you have the sort of abstract principles that are at stake that are very important for a segment of the left and for trade unions. But we're seeing today, people are responding to this call to defend the system, which goes beyond, sort of these abstract principles.
So, Cole, take a look into your crystal ball. Of course, France has a huge history of strike movements when this kind of change is proposed. What do you anticipate is going to happen over the coming weeks and months?
And that's the million-dollar question. I think if you look at what the labor unions are hoping for, what they've said, at least the head of the CGT, which is France's historically the largest militant union in France, the second largest today, they said they're hoping for at least 1 million demonstrators today on Thursday as a sort of sign of their strength. That number hasn't been achieved since 2010 under Nicolas Sarkozy. There was another a successful attempt to raise the retirement age from 60 to 62. They're hoping for 1 million demonstrators today. And I think today's mobilization is going to be pretty significant. But already then you have to ask the question of what's coming next. Unions will almost certainly sit down again. Those united unions will sit down and have another protest date scheduled, probably a week from now. So next week we'll have another protest date. And then we're going to have to see how the government's going to react. Are they going to respond by making some concessions based on the numbers today? Are they willing to concede a few points? Could they try to make an effort to engage one of the more moderate unions, the CFDT, which is the biggest union confederation? So could the government concede, make some concessions? And then, is this movement going to perhaps spread beyond these sort of one-day strike dates that unions have called for? We saw what happened with the Yellow Vest movement just a few years ago. Is this retirement issue going to perhaps tap into sort of more pent-up social discontent and anger at the government, anger at inequality? Again, we saw how quickly things spun out of control, if you will, with the Yellow Vest. And that, I think, is in the back of everyone's minds as well. So again, it's really hard to predict, but we're going to have to see what unions do. We're going to have to see if the government wants to make some concessions. And I guess another point I'll bring up is Macron's very fragile coalition, National Assembly. You mentioned he does not have an absolute majority. Is his bloc going to stick with this reform? What's going to happen if you have even a few legislators that are willing to say, you know what, we're not willing to back this reform? Could that maybe throw another and sort of modify the whole situation here? So a lot of question marks, but certainly today, I should say, it looks like we're going to a big mobilization. We'll have to see, how the government responds.
Thank you very much, Cole Stangler there, a journalist based in Marseille, France, joining us on WION Live. As the threat of a cost of living crisis and high food inflation still looms over the UK, the state-run NHS service is set to face a day of massive disruption next month, when nurses and ambulance workers will perform a joint walkout on the 6th of February over pay and working conditions. The heads of health services are calling the coordinated walkout a huge concern, and this could be the biggest day of industrial action the NHS has ever seen, as this would be the first time nurses, ambulance workers and paramedics would refuse to work at the same time. More than 3,500 nurses are already due to hold a fifth one-day strike on February 6th. Earlier, the GMB union announced that it aims to call more than 10,000 paramedics, ambulance and other health workers to stage a strike on the same day. Now, this puts a lot of pressure on the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak to find a way to end this industrial action. On Wednesday, the Labour leader Keir Starmer called on Sunak to apologise for the chaos caused by the Conservative Party as it failed to reach a settlement.
Mr. Speaker, over the 40 minutes or so that these sessions tend to last, 700 people will call an ambulance. 2 will be reporting a heart attack. 4 will be reporting a stroke. But instead of the rapid help they need, many will wait and wait and wait. So if he won't answer any questions, will he at least apologise for the lethal chaos under his watch?
According to a data released by the NHS, on average, people waited more than 90 minutes for an ambulance at the end of 2022. Several patients are on waiting lists for hospital treatment, and emergency departments were unable to see patients promptly. Well, for more on this, our correspondent Alex Isaac joins us live from London. And Alex, really, this is a huge moment because for the first time, all those different health workers are going to walk out on the same day and, of course, cause massive disruption.
Well, that's what we understand, that February 6th is going to be a day when many unions will come together and walk out. But we do know that Pat Cohen from the RCN, the Royal College of Nursing, said that it wasn't actually coordinated. She said in a statement that a lot of the other unions are all different. They just happened to coincide on the same day. And she didn't want to put it across that she was making sure that her members were trying to go forward on a general strike to cause as much disruption as possible. She does feel, and a lot of the members that are striking today, specifically of the nurses' strikes, are wanting to try and get heard themselves. When it's a huge cacophony of all of the unions, it may be a bit overwhelming. The government doesn't seem to be moving forward at the moment. Whether or not they'll move forward if there's more and more strikes, well, that's to be seen. We do know that for the Health Minister, Steve Barclay, that he hasn't been in these communications with the RCN to talk about pay, which is underlying all of these protests. At the moment, I'm here in South London, and there are 1 in 4 trusts across the UK that are striking today. But there is another strike coming ahead in February where more trusts will be joining as well, and that's when the ambulance workers will also be joining in, and that's going to be in February, where we're going to see a couple more strikes. So the strikes are definitely, the diary is filling already all the way through until at least March.
Alex Isaac, many thanks for your insight there, joining us live from London. Well, staying with the UK, and the rise in prices slowed for a second month in a row, but the cost of food, including milk, cheese and eggs, kept inflation at a 40-year high. The annual inflation in the UK fell to 10.5% in December, which is slightly lower in comparison to the 10.7% in November. Last month, the petrol and diesel costs witnessed a drop, but the food prices still continued to rise. UK inflation began soaring last year amid sharp prices rising worldwide due to the disruption of the supply chain caused by the war in Ukraine. The fallout from Brexit is also a prominent factor, as it's increased the cost of doing business across a range of sectors. Consumer inflation reached 11.1% in October, which is the highest level since 1980. According to official data, the average wage dropped 2.6% at the end of 2022 because pay rises failed to match the inflation. Now, this became a key issue for the ongoing industrial action in the UK. British actor Julian Sands has gone missing while hiking in the Californian mountains. The 65-year-old disappeared on January 13th after he'd gone hiking in the Baldy Ball area of the San Gabriel Mountains. According to the local police, ground teams immediately launched a search for the actor, but the effort was called off about 24 hours later due to avalanche risks and poor trail conditions. Well, born in England, Sands moved to California in the 1980s to pursue a Hollywood career after the success of the 1985 film A Room with a View, a period romance in which he was cast as the leading man opposite Helena Bonham Carter. The actor is known for his roles in A Room with a View, Leaving Las Vegas and Warlock, as well as TV appearances on 24, Smallville and Banshee. He's lived in Los Angeles since 2020 and most recently played a chief medical officer in Benediction. The English Premier League's domination of European football is now all but complete. For the first time in history, more than half of the world's 20 richest clubs are from England, in the annual list compiled by the accountancy firm Deloitte. Champions Manchester City generated a total revenue of $790 million, boosted by a sharp increase in commercial income. They were closely followed by Spanish champions Real Madrid, who posted a revenue of $771 million. English football has been dominant for years, but the report this year highlights just how quickly clubs have bounced back from the crippling effects of the coronavirus pandemic. The most notable was Liverpool, who climbed up 4 places to third and are now above their arch-rivals Manchester United for the first time in the report's 27-year history. Liverpool increased their revenues by $130 million last season on the back of a run to the Champions League final. Current Premier League leaders Arsenal replaced Italy's Juventus in this year's top 10. Paris Saint-Germain, Barcelona and Bayern Munich were the only other non-English teams in the top 10. Deloitte's report was published just hours after the ongoing Juventus chairman, Andrea Agnelli, warned that the dominance of the Premier League was bad for the rest of Europe. Agnelli could face trial over allegations of false accounting at the Old Lady and was one of the architects of the failed attempt to set up a breakaway European Super League in 2021. Well, that's all from your WION Live broadcast from London. I'm Oliver Regan. Thanks very much for joining us. See you at the same time tomorrow.
Arab